Hello, YouTube, and welcome to our first co-op review.
The review that's right for you. But
What we're doing here is basically each of us are going to scale the game out of either a 1 or a 0 in 5 different categories.
So the way we thought of doing this might be a little different than some other things you've seen. Maybe
Slightly less conventional.
whatever. It's just what we want to do. So basically, we take each category, 5 different categories that we're rating a game on, and it's either we liked it or didn't like it. So we're doing it on a binary code system. And so it's pretty much black and white. Category X, give it either a 1 for liking it, a 0 for not liking it, and then we total up our score, and then it becomes kind of a scale rating. So every category is black and white, just either thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever you want to do. But then by the end, we get a grade point average, and it's kind of like just like when you're in school. 50% is kind of like an F, 60% is a D, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so essentially, we take our totals, each of us, we add it together, and that gives us a score out of 10. And
So without further ado, let's go ahead and get on with our co-op review of Rule of Rose for the PS2 by Atlas. And Brandon, take it away.
Jennifer, the protagonist, has lost her memory and is completing tasks for the Red Crayon aristocrats to escape an unexplainable horror across a number of environments, hoping to remember that which she has forgotten.
So this would essentially summarize the story, or at least the intro. It's
It's pretty weak. It pretty much falls under the category of B movie in terms of it's the most overused aesthetic for a story. I mean, amnesia.
yeah.
It's everywhere.
Well, that and just the whole vague. You don't know if she's schizophrenic and she's hallucinating, or these things are really happening to her, or if it's not necessarily her own psyche and she's having like apparitions, like a projection in her mind, or if something is putting images into her mind. So you don't know if it's an internal or external, or if it's actually really happening.
Like a metaphysical thing.
Yeah. So, and I always hate that. Like, even in movies, I'm not going to start naming movies because I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I mean, I don't want to be spoon fed the story, but I want to be able to see subtle clues that would either lean towards one or the other, so that I could start building my own conclusions. But with this, it's so vague, you just don't know.
Yeah, the weird, imp children suddenly having rabbit heads and jumping at you, trying to bunny kick you is a little odd. But honestly, with all these strange things that are occurring throughout the game, it leaves you asking a lot of questions, and it kind of pulls me in and makes me want to keep playing to see if they answer any of these. So I kind of lean more towards enjoying the story than not.
Okay, so you kind of like the mystery part of it.
Yeah, the mystery is what really pulls me into a lot of that
Okay.
stuff, the intrigue, if you will.
Okay. So I'm assuming you're giving this a 1 then.
Yeah, story, I'm definitely gonna have to give it a 1 on that. I did enjoy all the questions they posed and made you really, try and think, well, what's happening here? Could it be this? Could it be that? And that kind of it keeps your brain going.
Okay. Sorry, Brendan. I'm gonna give it a 0, not because I hate the story, but this is either you either liked it or didn't like it. And if I had to choose between the two, I didn't like it. A, because as you said, it's kind of like that cliche. Oh, amnesia. I don't know what's going on. A dark past. And then I'm thrown into this world of disarray, and I don't know if this is supernatural events or if I'm just hallucinating. So for me, it was kind of like, eh. And it's not so much that story couldn't be entertaining, but it's just the way it flowed. It just didn't do much for me. So a 0.
Fair enough. The characters are quite diverse. Social outcasts, nerds, popular and well-groomed individuals. This kind of rounds out the cliche of high school, but none of these girls or characters are in high school, and it's kind of strange seeing as how they've got this whole what appears to be murder-based society.
Yeah, you have like the orphanage and like all these. I mean, you got to think it's based in
The 1930s.
30s.
Yeah.
So obviously the attire back then wasn't hipster or preppy or things like that. It was more or less you're either dapper looking or you're not looking good at all.
Right.
So there's only your two options there. You're either wearing ragtag clothing or you're wearing like proper
Proper etiquette kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
So Characters. I mean, the category of characters really envelops everything, like the character's style, like their appearance, their demeanor as far as like the setting of the game. So it's like, okay, are they are they representing a 1930s child accurately, aside from the dementia and the murdering?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, like the attire is appropriate, like what they're wearing, um, but when I think of characters, the most important thing that sticks out to me is like character development and interaction with the protagonist. For me, I didn't see a whole lot here because of it's essentially you're the protagonist and you might be crazy and everybody else is the antagonist and they're pretty much all crazy and they're either all mean to you except for the fat blonde girl that like likes you but cries is kind of schizo too.
She's totally out of it.
Yeah,
Like
but
100% gone.
but like it's not like a full cast of like diverse characters and like everybody either they some of them have things in common, some of them clash, and you see like this drama unfolding between all these people and relationships because this game is not about relationships,
No,
which it doesn't have to be a good game, but it looked kind of like it was like a blanket sweep. Let's just make 10 characters pretty much all the same personality, just a different character build.
yeah, like they'll have extremes that do fall within their individual categories of which they're modeled after in terms of archetypes or cliches. But ultimately, this over the top portrayal of whatever it is they're representing kind of off balances the whole personality factor, and it creates just what feels like a facade. It doesn't feel like anything rolls right. Everything just feels really out of place for the characters, and you really never see development. You just see extreme bipolar C.
Well put. So I would give character, or the characters category, a 0.
Yeah, no, they didn't really do a good job with that at all, in my opinion. It's too out there. I agree 100% on that one, 0.
Next category, we have graphics and or art design. So here we're looking at not just like the frame rate or the resolution, but we're looking at the how dark or bright, like the settings of different areas, the environments,
How sharp models are,
yeah.
how well designed the individual enemies can be or environments.
So Rule of Rose is obviously it falls under the category of survival horror. So that being said, I think the game does a good job of being eerie and kind of ominous, a little bit of a dark vibe.
It does. The game ultimately has a couple of different environments, all of which do seem really dark, and it kind of urges you to turn up the brightness either on your TV or in the game, because there are moments where all you can really see is black and then the character model, and it's kind of it just doesn't fit. It just doesn't work. But I mean, those areas once you turn up the brightness a little bit aren't really that common, so you really find yourself being a little bit more into it when you brighten it up a bit. It takes away from the darkness, but it does give you that better sense of atmosphere because you can see everything.
Honestly, like turning up I think it just, I mean, obviously it varies from TV to TV manufacturer, but turning up the brightness doesn't really do much because you can still tell what areas of the game are still dark because they do a good job of like, a hallway that your character wouldn't dare go down. It's still pitch black down that hallway, regardless of what the brightness is on your TV. So
Right.
it doesn't take away from the dark mood that much, but you definitely have to up it a little bit. That way you can actually interact with your environment
Yeah,
at
instead of running into a
comfortable
wall.
pace, instead of just like I'm gonna walk step by step and just spam the X button to see if I
Just
can
to find
pick up
it,
something.
yeah.
So for graphics and art design, I actually really liked it a lot. I thought it was appropriate for a survival horror game. Stuff is like, while polished makes it sound like it's like really clean and pretty looking. Obviously, for this game, you don't want things looking like bright and happy, but the graphics are appropriate for this genre, and things are dark and gloomy, kind of like rusty or vintage, 1930s.
Right.
Things are a little bit run down. So I'm going to give graphics a 1.
Yeah, I agree. The graphics definitely pulled you into the atmosphere, definitely made you feel like you were a part of this horror story, and it was done tastefully. I mean, you still can see the Art Deco setup for the era which it's in, And even if it is a little dark, you can still see this. And it really does kind of add to the mood. It's like everything seems eerie because of the way they've designed everything. They've done it tastefully, and it's not overly bright. It's not over. I mean, it can be a little too dark, but once again, it doesn't take away from the effect that they're trying to give you. So I definitely would give it a 1 as well. The vocal work is done fairly well, but the rest of the audio could use some improvement.
All right, so here we're talking about audio and sound. So, I mean, sorry. Okay, I guess that. Obviously, I sound pessimistic before I even said anything, but that's because I wasn't too impressed with the audio and sound.
Well, the audio, the overall audio was presented pretty poorly. I mean, yeah, you've got some decent vocal work, but it still could have been improved on there. But the sound effects, kind of lackluster, very few of them. And the worst offender of them all was like the music, because all they had was one violin track. I mean, it altered a little bit here and there, making different tracks, I'm sure, but some variety would have been very much so appreciated.
See, like, we grew up on Silent Hill, Resident Evil, so there's kind of that, ambient noise, kind of scary, like plucking on a violin string type of echoing and reverb down the hallway type of sound effects. So it's not necessarily a soundtrack, but this still falls under audio and sound. Rule of Rose didn't really have that. And you're right, they had like the strings playing in the background, which was appropriate for the time period, like that style of music, but I mean, I'm not expecting like grunge, heavy metal, like
oh no,
like
absolutely
Devil May
not.
Cry when you're in a fight, but when it's like fast-paced crescendoing of like a cello and violin, it really kind of feels out of place. But that's because
it's not what we're used to.
We're in the 21st century playing a game that takes place in the 1930s. So is the music appropriate for the time period? Yes, but
not for its game.
But right, I mean, it didn't have the impact on me that a soundtrack in a horror survival game usually does.
Right. What they should have done is they shouldn't have leaned so heavily on violin. Like when you get into an encounter with an enemy, they should have had it, instead of just changing the tempo of the violin, they should have like pulled in a different instrument, like started playing it on a big orchestral bass or something, some
clarinet. No.
Well, anything really would have just been, it would have broken away from that monotone soundtrack that it's got.
I mean, there's plenty of great orchestral or orchestra music. I don't even know what the right term
Orchestral.
is. Yeah, orchestral. That's okay. Yeah, but I mean, for example, like Beethoven, or just
any other pianist.
Like there was composers well before the 1930s where there was several different instruments involved, and there's cymbals splashing and the trombones going, and they got trumpets and. But you don't have that in this game.
No, you've got one person, maybe two, with violins and very little between them.
Think of Inception, the stereotypical soundtrack for like
Violinception.
The go-to soundtrack for Inception. If it had something like that, that would make combat a lot more enjoyable for the soundtrack.
Definitely needs something to really kind of up the tension higher.
Right, but it didn't have that, so I'm giving it a 0.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think the audio and particularly the music really could have used more time and effort, dedication. I mean, you didn't have any kind of ambiance noise, and the music was just pretty monotone. So it left a lot to be desired. Now, Rule of Rose has two types of gameplay that it pushes on you. It gives you combat, and it gives you item find. And with the combat's rather simple, but very effective. I mean, you've got one button to ready your weapon and the other button to attack the enemy. And when you knock the enemy down, you can't really keep beating on them, which you would think would be a downside, but the same combat mechanics apply to the enemy. So if the enemy knocks you down, they can't hit you while you're down, which makes the game feel more balanced and actually a little bit more fair, because it gives you a chance to, regather yourself and ready yourself for an attack, so that way you can actually progress instead of just being beat mercilessly.
And I think you're onto something, because, and don't get me wrong, like I love it when a game is fluid and it just it's very smooth in its gameplay, where you're controlling the character and everything's kind of going just right. But in a survival horror game, it kind of has to be a little clunky. It kind of has to give you a handicap. That way, you feel the struggle with enemies.
You feel the
because
tension.
because if you really did have like complete control on your character, and combat was just a cinch, there wouldn't really be any threat.
Right.
This isn't Street Fighter or some other like button mashing combo breaker type game.
Hadouken!
Yeah. Or even this isn't Drakengard.
No.
So, but you kind of have to have that in impairment, basically.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I didn't think it was a down. I didn't think it was a negative aspect of the game. I thought it was kind of appropriate for survival horror.
Oh, I agree 100% on that. And the item find was actually like the item search was kind of out of place, but it worked really well for the game, as odd as that sounds. I mean, you've got, long stretches of time where you're not encountering enemies, and instead of just running from room to room, this gives you incentive to, well, you've got a dog here that's going to, search for items for you. So you go in your inventory, you select the item, you hit find. Well, the dog smells it and starts looking for things that have people that have handled it or other items affiliated with it. And in this, turn of events, you'll end up picking up health items or like keys that will advance the plot or open new doors for you.
No, while I did enjoy that, the only downside of finding items is, okay, you have this item. This item can find 3 more items. So you have to equip this item, have your dog sniff it, and you have to do that command in every room in order to make sure you find stuff. So if you're a completionist, this might run you up a wall because you're going to have to go through loading screens and loading screens and loading screens to go through and make sure you get everything. Because not only will this item find the 3 other items, but then once you find those items, then you have to equip those items each individually in order to find more items. And it's cool to collect stuff, but at the same time thinking, okay, what's the point of all these things?
Yeah.
Which obviously, some things you actually do end up using, and I don't want to give away that stuff, but for me, it was kind of like, I don't mind going out of my way to do extra content, but it wasn't super captivating.
It becomes tedious after a
Yeah,
while.
definitely. That's in short, it was tedious. However, having said that, I'm still going to give gameplay a 1 because I thought it was appropriate for survival horror, and I didn't think it was god-awful controls.
Oh, I agree completely with you on that. My only real gripe with the whole item searching was that occasionally the dog would lead you to a door, and if you tried to open it, the door would slam shut right in front of you because you can't go through there yet. Which, that got a little frustrating occasionally, but that just means, switch to a different item right now because that's not something you can deal with right now. So, absolutely, I give that a 1 as well. It was very effective. And that collective gives us a what now, sir?
So, let's see. Let's review really quick for story. Brandon gave this a 1. I gave this a 0. And actually, for the rest of the categories, we actually agreed on everything, which we weren't planning on doing that because we actually haven't talked about these 5 categories together and what we thought. So we came to these conclusions completely on our own. Characters got 0s, graphics and art design got 1s, audio and sound got 0s, and gameplay got 1s across the board.
So that gives us a collective total of a 5 out of 10. This game isn't the best, and even to the people that it would appeal to, it's not the greatest, but it still has something there for people to enjoy.
If this game got a 0, it would be a run now, run fast, run far away. 10 would be, I'm going to marry this game. 5 is, you know what?
It's worth a try because you never know.
Pick it up, dink around with it. Who knows? You're not wasting your time. It's probably not the best investment of your time either. But then again,
who knows? You might enjoy it.
So there you go.